Hey there, everyone, and welcome back. I'm here again today with Peter, and we're going to take you through a mix of astrology and tarot insights to help you navigate and make the most of the first 3 months of the new year of 2024. So we're going to take a look at a mix of astrology insights and tarot insights for January, February, and March of 2024. And I think to get us started, Peter, you're going to kick us off with a little bit about the card for the year and then about the tarot insights for January as well.
Yes, yeah. So, like a lot of tarot practitioners, I would take a look at the digits of the year. So, by that, I mean we have the current year, 2024, with the digits being 2, 0, 2, and 4. And we would just simply add them up. So, 2 plus 0 plus 2 plus 4 gives us the total sum of 8, making the eighth card of the major arcana our card of the year. So, in this particular case, the card of the year is the strength card. Now, there is a bit of an anomaly with this system for this particular year, and I'll talk about that really briefly afterwards. But I want to hold up the card because when you take a look at the image of the card, you kind of get the undertone of what strength means in the tarot. So, card number 8 is the strength card, but the strength card in the tarot is it's not aggressive strength. It's not military strength. This is inner strength. So again, when we think about this card, we think about the warrior queen who tames the beast. She doesn't conquer the beast. It's not strength for might's sake. It's actually strength for the greater good. So I think I
Mm.
almost think a better name for this card is fortitude. And I actually think in some earlier Italian decks, that's what they called it. I think it's Fortezza or Fortezza. My Italian is not good. But when we talk about fortitude, we actually talk about the idea of overcoming a challenge or overcoming adversity. And that's where strength lies in
Mm.
2024. So it's not a sense of conquering or besting or winning. It's actually a sense of tempering or taming. So even if we think of that image, that idea of taming the beast, that taming is the underlying energy that strength will bring. I did want to add, though, that in an older numbering system, so strength is actually not the original card of number 8 card in the tarot. Justice is actually the original number 8 card. So in the original decks, once numbering started to become consistent, in the Tarot de Marseille, the number 8 card was La Justice. So although I know a lot of people are talking about strength being the card of the year, I really think that that original numbering system is important because
Mm.
I think strength is going to lend itself to that idea of fortitude. But in a lot of ways, that undertone of justice, that undertone of what benefits the common good, for example, that even the overarching laws that govern humanity are also going to play a really important part in 2024. So if I sum that up without getting into a ton of detail, we've got 2024 with themes of fortitude in the face of adversity. So that idea of strength when faced with a challenge. But we also have sort of an undertone, an undercurrent of topics that really do focus on justice, on what is collectively right, or again, as I
Mm.
had mentioned, that right for the greater good. Strength as a means of advancing that greater good to show the fortitude, to show strength in the face of challenges, to take on the role of the warrior queen, to tame the lion, with its jaws open wide. So those are, that's when we talk about, and this is unique. Most years don't have two cards represented in the tarot system. 8 and 11 are the only kind of two cards that sort of became swapped when in a tarot deck. So I wanted to point that out. So we've got 2024, strength is the card of the year. We have an undertone of justice that's there as well. So for people thinking, well, that's great, Peter, but what does that look like? So 2024, situations that show strength that shifts from a display of might to one of taming. So I think of things like diplomacy, for example.
Mm.
So this might be a situation where you're in a power display or you're in a power struggle with a manager or property owner or somebody who's in a position of power relative to you, and then the situation shifts. So instead of a resolution coming from a show of might, it actually comes from a display of diplomacy, or that idea of calming the beast. Or it might be, that the rightful outcome comes from the idea of recognizing strength in the face of challenges, or even the idea of speaking truth to power. So,
Mm.
that's what that concept of strength might look like in 2024. No. And then you wanted me to briefly touch on January. Did you have something you wanted to add to that before I jump in,
I
or?
mean, I think the only thing, it's so interesting to hear that, and even how in the tarot deck that, the strength card or the card in the number 8 position is one that has switched throughout the history of tarot. The themes around particularly the justice card, they so resonate with a big astrological signature for the year, which is Pluto coming into Aquarius. And that is something that is going to further emphasize this air period of time that we're in, this air kind of great cycle. And the air element in astrology is it's really associated with the human intellect, like the idea of the power of negotiation, or that idea of, like when you said diplomacy, the back and forward, the figuring out how to collaborate or to work together in a way where logic or intellect kind of overrides the primal passions, if you like. So some of the themes you were talking about was really interesting, thinking about that in the context of, Pluto coming into Aquarius, starting this new 20-year cycle that is really going to ask us to work with the gifts of our intellect or our intelligence as humans, like to really get into the essence of our humanity and to figure out how that can be used for the good of many rather than for, the success of an individual, for instance.
Yeah, and I think that's always, from the tarot's perspective, it's always the benefit of those collective cards, because they really
Mm,
do almost embrace that I use the word overarching energy that sort of sits with everyone. So the
mm.
idea that that could be an element of everyone's experience at some point in time during 2024. But I think you had said I'll segue into January as
Yes,
well. So
yes.
I'm going to use the same kind of system. So that idea of, January, breaking it down numerologically by taking the first month and adding it to the year 2024.
Mm-hmm.
So we've got 2 plus 0 plus 2 plus 4, which gives us 8. And then we add 1 for the first month, for the month of January, which gives us 9, which is the card of the Hermit. And let me just got it out here. I do. So we have the card of the Hermit, which is really a card of introspection, of staying in solitude. But, as I kind of hold this card up, it is also a card to focus on our own light. So,
Mm,
we've got the Hermit here who carries his own light, and which means that that month of January might be that time where we're called upon to be our own caretaker, the own
mm,
keeper of our own light. So, it might be, wise advice for what could be a time of indulgence that usually precedes January, November, December, holiday times in many parts of the world, celebration, gathering of people, and at times overindulgence. That the Hermit might be that reminder that says, you've got to take care of yourself. You have to be the keeper of your
mm.
own light. So that's kind of an underlying energy where, don't be afraid to withdraw into yourself and recognize that, you need to put yourself perhaps ahead of the needs of others. um, yeah, so that's from a general perspective, that's sort of the overview of the Hermit card in the month of January.
I love that. I mean, one thing as you're saying that really strikes me is in astrology, January is the month where the sun spends about 3 weeks in the sign of Capricorn. And that is a sign that is sometimes associated with that idea of the hermit or the lone wolf, the idea of someone who's kind of very self-contained, maybe a little bit reserved. And, this particular January 2024, we also have Mars in Capricorn for most of the month. Mars moves into Capricorn around the 4th of January and will be there till mid-February. And Capricorn is the exaltation placement of Mars. So it's a really great iteration of Mars, or a great version of Mars that we have kicking us off this year. And Mars in Capricorn is very much about that quiet productivity. Mars in Capricorn is very strategic. It's very focused on what needs to be done. It's got a clear plan, but it's also willing to take the efforts or to do the actions. You know, sometimes we have a lot of ideas about what we want to do, or we have dreams about how we'd like things to be, but we don't always get into the taking action to make that happen. And one of the words that I'm really thinking about for January is this idea of movement. And there's a number of technical reasons, which I won't bore everyone with, but the Mars coming into Capricorn is a big part of it. The idea of getting some clarity, getting some focus, and something you said, Peter, around the idea of like taking care of your own light. Mars in Capricorn is a little bit like, I know what I'm trying to do, and I'm going to stay on track with my goals. There's a sense of focus, or there's a level of drive and determination. Like you're no longer as easily distracted. You know, we had a lot of energy in late November and December that was a kind of scattered and, you know, pulling people in all kinds of different directions. And this Mars energy coming into January it's really kind of certain, it's very intentional, it's very practical, but it's also very grounded. It's like, no, this is what I'm doing, so I won't be able to do that. And I think managing distractions is going to be a little bit easier this January. So it's interesting to see some of those little pieces kind of resonate.
Yeah. Well, we've always said that when we do this, that we don't
Yeah.
talk ahead of time, we don't plan ahead of time, and we're always amazed as to what kind of connections are made between both systems. So that's really
Yeah,
interesting.
it
I
is
find that
really
interesting.
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so then should we dive into February?
So yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. Dive right into February again, following the same system. So I've got 2 + 0 + 2 + 4, which is 8. I'm just going to add 2 to that for the second month of the year, which gives us the number 10. 10 breaks down to the Wheel of Fortune. Um, there's a second card that we can reduce to, but we'll focus on the wheel first. Um, the wheel, I always think, is best served from that idea of, que sera, sera, whatever will be, will be. The kind of quoting an old song, but this one actually makes me think of I won't say a more recent song because it's slightly more recent, but there's this 60s kind of funk jazz rock song by a band called Blood, Sweat, and Tears, of course, written by a Canadian. So excited about that, called Spinning Wheel. And the line in the song is it's what goes up must come down, spinning wheel, gotta go round. That
Mm,
is the theme for February. It's the reminder that the Wheel of Fortune reminds us that life has up and down cycles.
mm,
So in February, it's that reminder: celebrate when times are good, but you've got to recognize that usually life doesn't stay there at a constant peak. It has a cycle. And February, based on that card of the month, looks like a time with some highs and some lows. And that Wheel of Fortune card just kind of says, ride the highs, wait out the lows, recognizing that that karmic wheel is really just the regular cycle of life. Now,
mm,
there is an underlying tone here because when we look at things numerologically, the number 10 is not completely reduced. We could take that digit and we could actually add 1 and 0, which gives us 1, which gives us the Magician, which is one of my favorite cards in the deck. So, when we've got that Magician card, what we bring to that idea of that up and down is the
mm,
manifester, the card that makes things happen, that uses the tools that he has in this particular deck, or that we have, that
mm,
are at our disposal. And they're, again, I like holding up the card because it's a visual medium, but we can see the tools on the magician's table. So the magician actually has tools at their disposal. So in some ways, the magician is kind of saying, I know the wheel goes up and goes down, but you actually have the tools to be able to manifest what you need to be able to support yourself during those times, particularly when the wheel is at its lowest. We kind of draw in that concept of the magician
mm,
that lets us manifest what it is that we need. The other piece of the magician, though, and this would tie into the magician's both astrological correspondence, which is Mercury, but also the idea of the card as it used to be called, which was le battleur, which is the busker, the street performer, even the sleight of hand artist. That there is a trickster component to to the magician. So,
Mm,
it's also a card that says, as you're wanting to make things happen, as you're using that energy to manifest things in those times when that wheel of life is at its lowest, be wary of, call them the con artists and the tricksters and those sleight of hand that, that can really, kind of trick us when we're at our lowest. So, and again, I'll talk a little bit about, well, what does that look like? Well, it simply means that the recognition of that spinning wheel philosophy. So not getting too inflated when things are going well, not getting too full of ourselves, but also not getting too down when
mm,
things are low. Kind of working
mm,
hard to keep ourselves at an even keel. That's kind of what
mm.
the tarot was telling us that we should look for in the month of February.
That's so beautiful. I mean, and when you were saying that idea of how to keep yourself at an even keel, even in a low point, one of the themes that I'm really have in mind for February based on the astrology is this idea of community and connection. And I wonder if there's something in that around, staying in touch or in contact with people of like mind or like spirit, so
Right.
that there isn't that sense, sometimes when you feel down, there's a tendency to kind of withdraw or pull
Withdraw. Yeah.
back.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I say that, so, I mentioned earlier that Pluto is coming into Aquarius this year. So Pluto will actually move into Aquarius around the 20th, the 21st of January, and it will be in Aquarius until September. And then it just pops back into Capricorn for a final sort of 10 weeks or so. And then in November, Pluto settles into Aquarius permanently. And so as we close out 2024, Pluto will be in Aquarius for the next 2 decades, a really long cycle. And what's interesting about February and why I wanted to focus a little bit more on Pluto in Aquarius in February is that in February, we have each of our personal planets or quicker moving planets will be in Aquarius with Pluto in Aquarius. So we'll start the month with Mercury coming into Aquarius. Mid-February, Mars comes into Aquarius, and a little later that month, Venus will come into Aquarius. And so what we're really getting in February is like Mercury, Venus, and Mars are each going to meet Pluto in this kind of new place. And each of those interactions, Mercury, Mars, and Venus, will reveal a different facet or a different set of topics or themes that Pluto in Aquarius is going to have us all engaging with more deeply over these next, 20 years or so. And Aquarius is a sign, it's an air sign, and it is a sign of community and connection. It's a sign of being with people who are of like mind or have these sort of shared visions for humanity. And so Aquarius, with all these planets connecting with Pluto in Aquarius, we're really going to be sort of shown what the future is going to look like. And I think there's a mix of that coming through in ways that might be really inspiring in terms of the potential for innovation and technology, and maybe the use of things like AI or robotics that is really within a place of integrity. But we also might see some of the shadow side of these kind of cutting edge developments and inventions, which is how that knowledge or that technology can be used in a way that might be controlling or manipulative or have that underhand. So there's something about February, which is almost as though it feels a bit like the future has arrived and we haven't figured out yet how to be human in this new space, if you like. And that's where staying in conversation with people, not just perhaps of like mind, but also of people who you might disagree with, or who might hold different opinions to you. And how do we negotiate differing priorities or differing pressures when there's so much that's happening perhaps so quickly? So I think February is a really interesting month in the context of 2024 as a whole, because it does start to show us these, I always think of a diamond for some reason, when I'm thinking about Pluto in Aquarius, and or like a crystal, a light catching crystal, where it's got all the facets on the different side of it. And, the Venus Pluto piece reveals something about what relationships and partnerships and pleasure might look like over this next couple of decades. And the Mars Pluto is like, how do we navigate differences, and how are we going to navigate tension? How are we going to find the way to courage and bravery, and how are we going to protect those that have less or that are weaker in some way. And then the Mercury Pluto is very much in the technological business innovative space. So the idea of, perhaps a breakthrough where science or technology, robotics, even space. Anyway, there's a lot I could say. I'm totally airing things out here with just like a million ideas, but that gives you a sense of just how much is kind of activated and stimulated, and the air energy, which is thinking and learning, and the intelligence and the use of intelligence. But as an individual, as you're getting kind of, maybe your mind is buzzing with a bunch of new ideas and choices, do take some quiet moments just to see how things sit with you and how you can stay in a place of integrity with yourself as we kind of enter this new chapter collectively. So that's a lot about February.
Yeah, I know you said you mentioned airing. I thought that was interesting considering what you were talking
Yeah,
about.
it's just, oh my gosh, there's so much. And that's February, I think. Yeah.
And then you talked about, I think that solitude wasn't the word that you used. It was the word that I had grabbed, which, and kind of alone and isolation. And that when if we're going to go into March, that theme kind of continues with the card of March. So, you can follow the theme now. I've done 2024, which adds up to 8. I've added each of the months. And that month number 3 is card 11. So 8 plus 3 brings us to 11, which we visited already. So we've got that justice card that is now I guess, the primary energy of the month of March, but a reminder to what we had talked about in that card of the year, where 11 and 8 act as a pair in the tarot. So I'm just going to hold up. So the main focus for March would be that justice. So if we talked about the idea of talking that truth to power with that here with the underlying sense of strength or fortitude, it's like we almost have a reverse of the priorities that we see sort of playing themselves out in the whole year. But I also think because the tarot is playful, and I think this card is a reminder, because it's not the only card or the only card pair that comes into play in March, and I'll explain that in a second. I think it's a reminder to say, you've focused on what the energies are for 2024. March is sort of a revisit. It's the second time, or it's the month in which we are going to see cards 8 and 11 play themselves out. So that idea of the yearly or the annual energy, the energy of the whole year, is really going to be important in that month of March. But then the number 11, though, does reduce again. So 1 plus 1 is 2, which kind of brings us to the card of the High Priestess. And I always have the
One of my
cards ready to go,
favorites.
right? It's a beautiful card.
Yeah.
And it kind of brings us back to that introspection that the Hermit kind of gave us in that month of January. But of course, the High Priestess is different, right? She's mysterious and she's reflective, but she is introspective, kind of like the Hermit. So she does have us facing inward. But the Hermit's journey, and this is, where the difference lies, is that the Hermit's journey is a lonely journey. And the High Priestess the High Priestess's journey is not a lonely journey. It's actually one where advice or guidance comes through interaction with other people. So if we think about that concept of the High Priestess, then March might be a time to either seek or to provide advice. So, just to give a bit of history around some of the imagery of the card, the High Priestess is often associated with Pythia, who is the oracle at Delphi. And it's a reminder that link is a reminder that the High Priestess is actually quite discerning in the guidance that she provides. She doesn't provide advice and guidance to everyone. So if we're talking about March being a month where we're looking to focus on that reflective piece, that mysterious piece, the shifting away from the solitude of the Hermit, we are still being discerning around either where we're providing our support
Mm.
and guidance or where we're getting our support and guidance from. So, from a collective perspective, in the month of March, it's a time where, people are either looking for you for advice or where you're looking to people for advice. So, regardless of whatever side of that equation you're sitting on, you need to be discerning. You need to make
Mm.
sure that you're selective um, around where you're providing the advice. The phrase I would use would be reflect before you connect. Oh, if you're
Beautiful.
right. So
Yeah.
if you're looking to provide that connection with someone, you need to give some thought before you do that. So that's where
Mm.
the high priestess is coming from, for the month of March. That's kind of the undertone. And again, I'll just sort of repeat, we've got that justice strength juxtaposition as opposed to the strength justice juxtaposition that sort of oversees the entire year. But really, I think that primary energy is that full reduction down to card number 2, the high priestess, and that idea, just to repeat that, that phrase, reflect before you connect. That really would
Mm.
be the highlight of the month of March. So
And that is so interesting because one of the features astrologically of March is that we actually enter eclipse season. And towards the end of March, there'll be a lunar eclipse in the sign of Libra. And there are really 2 key words or concepts that are associated with the sign of Libra. We have relationships and partnerships, and we also have themes of fairness, justice, and equality. So that's really interesting. Like that, reflect before you connect. It's not the exact phrase that I would use using the astrology, but it's in that zone of rethinking relationships, which is a huge part of the eclipses in the sign of Libra. We will have 2 eclipses in Libra this year in 2024. One of them is happening end of March, and the other one is going to happen in October. And so this eclipse in March, it's very much about the idea of release or perhaps endings and letting go where relationships are concerned. And so there's something here about relationships are changing. Our loyalties and our alliances are shifting. We're learning more about ourselves, the people that we're in partnership with, and we're wanting to make some tweaks or adjustments so that we can really deepen the relationships that matter. And there are some partnerships, maybe challenging partnerships, that are going to need attention in March. And it may be that some challenging relationships may come to their conclusion that month as well. So we have this eclipse in Libra. And we also have Venus, the planet naturally associated with relationships, is making 2 really important aspects in March. She'll link to Saturn and then she'll link to Jupiter. And my sense of that is, the good relationships get even better, and the challenging partnerships or relationships we're in, they will come under a little bit of pressure or scrutiny as we're all kind of reassessing who we want to be committed to or who we want to stay in partnership with. So there's that relationship side of the lunar eclipse in Libra. And then there's also the justice side of, or the fairness and the equality side of Libra. Because, in astrology, Libra is represented by the scales, which most often are associated with the scales of justice. So the application of law or ethics, that type of thing. And so it sort of does occur to me that any significant kind of legal matters, perhaps in the collective, because eclipses are often markers that describe more collective type events or shifts. There may be, a big legal case or a big court decision that is decided or is being discussed, particularly through the second half of March, because that's when the eclipse is at the 25th of March. That's going to have a bit of an impact. So I think March does seem like a really striking month. And with that eclipse, it's this sense of alliances are changing. For some of us personally, part of that in our own everyday relationships is figuring out how to maintain a relationship with ourselves as well as others. It's not always that we have to throw all our relationships out, but it's just figuring out, how can I continue to be in a loving place with myself? And sometimes that means honoring your needs or verbalizing things that maybe don't get verbalized. So we're trying to blow the cobwebs out on challenging relationship habits or patterns or tendencies. And if you're in a really supported, nourishing partnership, that's going to allow you to grow and evolve within yourself, but also within the relationship, because your partner will be willing to go with you. But sometimes when we're ready to make those growth choices, it reveals the kind of people that we're with, when some people are like, no, I want you to stay, in the box that I feel safe with you in. So that sort of deeper, nuanced, but really rich and potent relationship space is definitely a focus that I'm seeing for March. So it was interesting when you were talking, Peter, about some of the similarities there.
Yeah. And I'll just, you know, one of the correspondences with the major cards, and it's interesting as you talk about eclipse and Libra, is the correspondence of the high priestess in the tarot is the moon, and the correspondence with justice is Libra.
Is
So,
Libra. Oh,
right,
interesting. Yes.
right. So I thought, as you were talking about that, I thought, well, that's like those two astrological correspondences really are connecting those two things through, really
Yeah,
through.
so almost like, if we're talking about a lunar eclipse, which is a full moon thing in the sign of Libra, if you were looking to represent that in the tarot, you'd almost end up at the high
With those
priestess
two
and the
cards.
justice card. Yeah.
Correct. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So
Exactly.
I think that's going to be so interesting for us
Right.
all just to keep a track on and see how
Right.
March unfolds. And yeah, I think what we're left with at the end of March is really rich sort of material or connections, but we just have to go through the releasing to get to that. Anyway, I mean, again, it's a bit of an air thing, so
Right.
I could obviously go on for days about it. But is there anything else, Peter, you want to share about the tarot of January, February, March?
No, not at all. I think we did a good job of sort of covering that overarching theme of cards 8 and 11, and then looking at each of the kind of food for thought in a collective way for each of the months. So no, nothing else to add. How about you?
No, I think that's really good. I mean, there's just so much happening this year, certainly from an astrological perspective.
Yeah.
But these do stand out to me as, some of the key themes or the real features of this first quarter of the year. So
Yeah.
we will be back to share more with you in the second quarter of the year. Before we go, Peter, do you want to let people know any special events or courses or tarot happenings you have coming up, and
Yeah.
also where people can find out more about you and your work?
Sure. So I'll start out with where you can find out more about me and my work. PeterWhiteTarot.com at my website. Blog posts, offerings for consultations that can meet everyone's needs. So that's where to keep track of me there, along with my kind of social media. So on Instagram and on Twitter, same place, Peter White Tarot. Two things I'd like to highlight. The first, I guess, from a print perspective for people who are in Australia, but from a digital perspective for those that are worldwide. Wellbeing Astrology 2024. I was actually very privileged to contribute this article right here. You can actually see it on the cover. So an article that focused on both astrology and tarot. So I'm one of many featured authors in this publication. And then the second one is an upcoming course that I have called Learning the Tarot, Beginner's Journey, that is really focused on people who are curious but have very little to no knowledge about the tarot. So this is a 5-lesson course that starts on January the 16th, and that will walk people through the basics of the tarot, from its history to its structure. And then we'll look at each of the cards and card groups, and then we'll finish off with some simple exercises and ways to be able to use and integrate the tarot into your everyday life, or even share it with people with whom you're connected. So that starts on January the 16th. We'll include information on how to sign up in the notes here, but I'd also, invite you to head to peterwhitetarot.com to get more information. I'll just add that there is a special introductory price that's actually only available for the next few days. So it does start on January 16th. Its regular price is $108, which, when you think about it, is less than $25 a lesson, but it's actually available for $88 for the next few days. So if you're interested in learning the tarot, if you've always thought, oh, I'd really like to know what that's about, please come by and visit. We'd love to have you join us in class. No, that's it for me, Kelly.
Fantastic. How exciting. That'll be a great course for anybody who is looking to learn more about the tarot. As for me, I have got lots of detail about all the astrological aspects that are happening over these next few months inside my membership. So Kelly's Astrology Guide monthly membership. You can find out more or even join the community via my website, kellysastrology.com. If you're interested in using astrology to help you time your life and make really effective choices with when to be productive and when to rest, or when to have that important conversation or when to avoid having that important conversation, the insights inside the membership will be so helpful for you. So if that's of interest to you, pop over to kellysastrology.com where you can sign up and join us today. So I think that's it from us, Peter.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining me again. And thank you all for watching. If you are enjoying our episodes, let us know in the comments below. And as always, please, like or follow, subscribe wherever you're listening. And we look forward to sharing more next time. Thanks again for joining me today,
Thank
Peter.
you. Thank you.
Bye for now, everyone.